You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
You're watching West Hartford Community Television.
For the community, by the community.
Hi, I'm Sarah Connor, and you're watching Life and Style with Sarah. On tonight's show, we are going to uncover some of the hidden gems of Connecticut. And my guest is Steve Wood, the creator of ConnecticutMuseumQuest.com, and its mission is to debunk the myth that there's nothing to do in Connecticut. Steve, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So when I thought of doing this show, I was thinking, I have kids who are in school, they have school vacations, sometimes we have a day on the weekend where we don't have anything to do, and I thought, if we don't really want to travel too far, there must be things in Connecticut other than the Children's Museum or the New Science Museum to do. And so as I was doing my research, I found your website, ConnecticutMuseumQuest.com, and I thought, aha, this is a huge resource. There's lots of things to do in Connecticut. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you started the website and what it is meant to do?
Sure. The website started pretty much exactly how you found it. Just myself looking for things to do. Once my wife and I had our son, and we could no longer go on long vacations to exotic places, which we miss.
I know that feeling.
We took advantage of our time before we had a child and had a good time, and we're very happy with sort of staying closer to home. But sort of my own personal itch to get out there and see what there was to do got the better of me, and didn't really formulate a plan until I was dropping my son off at my mother-in-law's house in New Britain, day in, day out, and kept seeing a sign for something called the New Britain Industrial Museum. And I had never heard of it, but I'm not a native of Connecticut, so I started asking around to my wife and her friends, and they were all from New Britain. They had never heard of it, let alone go there. So I said, I'm going to go there and see what the heck an industrial museum is all about. And I roped in a friend with similar odd interests that I have, and we went there on a Friday afternoon, and it was just great. There was a couple older gentlemen there, and we thought it was going to be about 20 minutes of Stanley tools, but it turned out to be about 2 hours of everything from old toasters to old blenders to Stanley tools and some other things. And these guys were just great, and sort of left there thinking, this is one little place in one town, how much more is out there? And it kind of took off from there. And it's been 3.5 years now, and I've found many, many, many other places that have been fun, and most people would say probably more interesting than an industrial museum, but everyone has different tastes, and there's a lot of different things out there.
So your website, your goal on the website is to visit all of the museums in Connecticut, right? At some point.
Yeah,
I don't know if you have a time frame laid out for how long that's going to take, because it's a huge list.
Yeah, just the other day, I went to my 150th museum, and I sort of sat back and looked at the whole list and realized that if I were to go to all the places I've sort of uncovered, I'm about 25% done, and that's been 3.5 years. So we're still talking at least another 10 or 11 years, on average, and it probably would be more just because I've hit a lot of the easy ones, the open on the weekends, the more local ones. So realistically, probably 15 years or so if I keep at it.
So the total is over 500 museums, right?
Well over. It's probably closer to 600 now.
Which is amazing, because Connecticut is not that big of a state. And even if you look at, I went and I said, okay, so how many are in West Hartford? Because we know about the Children's Museum. That one's, you can't miss that one. The Noah Webster House is very active and does a lot of things, but there are actually 12 museums in Connecticut. There's, let's see, I'm going to go through the list because I really found this amazing. There's one at the American School for the Deaf. There's the Children's Museum. There's the Joe Soloff Gallery at the University of Hartford. There's Neil's American Dream Museum, which coincidentally, he does a show called Calling All Collectors for the station.
His museum isn't so much a museum, but...
It's his house, right?
It's his house.
Yeah, so by appointment.
Yeah, he's a little bit hesitant. I haven't had a chance. I had a meeting set up a couple years ago, but it didn't work out on my end. But it was a museum, and all the stuff's still there, so it's still a museum.
It's still a museum. There's the Noah Webster House, of course. There's the Sarah Whitman Hooker Homestead, which I've been driving by all the time on New Britain Avenue, never saw it, and it's up on a up on a hill where Maine and New Britain intersect. And then there's apparently a very well-known Museum of Jewish Civilization at University of Hartford, the Slipe Gallery at the University of Hartford, the St. Joseph's College Art Museum, and the Chase Family Gallery at the JCC. And of course, most people with young children know about Westmore Park. So even just in West Hartford, there are a bunch that you don't know about. Are there ones that you've been surprised about, or how? Well, let's back up a second. How do they make it onto the list? Do they just have to say museum, or how did you find them all?
Yeah, that's an ever-changing sort of...
How do you qualify for the list?
I've put far more thought into that than any sane human being ever should do. Even just reading that list, I'm sure some people sort of scratch their head and say, really, is a college art gallery a museum? And first and foremost, if they call themselves a museum, they're a museum, as far as I'm concerned. A good example is at the Plainville Library, downstairs in the children's department, up on the wall, there's the word museum. And if you actually go there, it's a collection from former Governor Trumbull collected all the bird's eggs of every species of bird that lives in Connecticut. It's that and a bunch of old Native American artifacts that were found in the area. Just a couple cases of that, but they have the word museum on the wall.
Right.
You won't find it anywhere online or in a magazine or in a brochure, but somebody emailed me about it, and I went and sure, it's on the list. They call themselves a museum.
Right. And someone spent a lot of time collecting those things, and cataloging them, and
it's pretty neat.
Yeah.
A former governor actually took the time to do that and catalog it, so I think that definitely qualifies. But the art museum, as you drop down levels to art galleries, it gets fuzzy with me, and I sort of waffle back and forth. To my mind, a college art gallery is not commercial. It is just showing artists, and the one at St. Joe's and the one at Trinity have shown internationally known artists just in the last year that I've had the chance to go see, and one of the Hartford ones does as well, or University of Hartford ones. So they qualify. It's the level below that, sort of the more commercial art gallery that I don't have on the list, and I don't think I will. I get invitations to their little openings all the time.
yeah.
It's nice free wine and cheese. There's one right here in Blueback Square now. But so the list, it has evolved, it has changed. Nature centers I consider museums.
Well, they have some very interesting artifacts of wildlife, and some Native American, and
I agree. You don't have to convince me.
I'm just trying to sell it. So what has been your biggest surprise? Is there, because I know that some of the museums, like you said, it's tucked away in a library. What has been so far in your 150 museums? What was your biggest surprise?
There's been a lot, and I can honestly say there's probably only been maybe 2 or 3 bad surprises, which we won't get into here.
Talk about the bad ones.
But geez, there's a ton. I mean, from the big ones that you may have heard about but never thought about, down at Yale, there's a couple large art galleries, and you say, yeah, art gallery, that's going to be pretty good. But they're as good as the Wadsworth, I think. They're huge. They've got, I'm not an art history major, but I recognize 50 artists that they have down there, and they're free.
So the surprise is the quality of, or this renown of the artists.
For me, yeah, I just really wasn't expecting the size and the breadth. The Mattatuck Museum in Waterbury is another big one that people have heard about, but once you go there, it's modern, it's really well put together. Plus, there's a whole art museum component to it, which is pretty neat. But then there's the whole subcategory of the head scratchers, I guess. That there's a down along the Connecticut River in East Haddam. There's a shad museum. Did you?
Okay, I've not heard of that. No, a shad museum.
Yeah, our state fish is the shad, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Which apparently was a heated debate in our state legislature about 15 years ago, which is an interesting story unto itself. But shad fishing was a large part of our, Connecticut's economy 200 years ago, all the way up through about 30 years ago. So, and it's suffered lately for a multitude of reasons. So there's a museum that has everything having to do with shad and shad fishing and the shad history and just meeting the people, meeting the gentleman that runs the place. It's great. You spend an hour and this is his life. And it's not a situation where it's a funny thing. It's actually like a really interesting thing and an eye-opening thing. And I've had that experience time and time again. Out in Canterbury, there's a truck museum. People know about there's a trucking museum in Middlebury on the other side of the state, which has a lot of glossy brochures and that stuff. But this one in Canterbury, there's no advertising or anything, so it's actually part of a sort of a landfill/junkyard thing.
Okay.
But then you go in and it's amazing. It's huge. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of antique trucks in pristine condition, and the guy showing us around was...
So trucks like farm trucks or trucks like
They've
haul
got
across the country trucks? Or everything in
pretty
between?
much everything. They've got a
Wow.
whole Mack truck cab that was the last one of that model to roll off the line, so it's special. They've got restored trucks from the 1920s and the 1930s.
Huh.
They've got machined miniature trucks that guys make in their basements to the ultimate detail. And I expected to spend half an hour there, and we were there for 2 hours, and it was great.
Well, and I would imagine people that either volunteer or have collected these things, that's their passion. So that I'm sure, it's infectious when someone's that excited about something that, you may not have expected it to be,
Yep. And again,
trucks.
that story plays out over and over in town after town, and it just takes a little bit of digging, or just go to my website and I've done all the work for you pretty much.
Yes.
And if something sounds kind of quirky or offbeat, there's a good chance that it will be far more interesting than
you expect.
Or you didn't even know about it 10 minutes ago. So you're a better person for it.
So I took my girls recently to the Connecticut Historical Museum, which is a bigger museum, and it's right off of Asylum as you're heading from West Hartford into Hartford, and it's there's a bend in the road, and it's right there, and I've passed it a million times, and I've never gone in. I was kind of inspired by doing this show, and they were having the first Saturday of every month they have 3 hours where it's free for a family to go. So I thought, well, let's go check it out. And they were doing an activity where you make Victorian Valentines, and my girls love crafts, so I thought, well, this is great. So we went, and I had no idea what to expect, similar to you with some of these other instances, because you look at it, and yes, it's big, and it's clearly a well-established facility, but it doesn't really look like kids would enjoy it that much. We went in, and they had an absolute ball. I have a clip of our time, it's short, of our time at the Connecticut Historical Museum. So let's roll that in, and we'll be back in a second. had a ball, if you can see from that clip. And I do want to qualify, I did the video on a handheld flip camera, so it's a little shaky, so I apologize if it made you a little nauseous watching it. But my girls didn't want to leave. I mean, we went just to go for a couple hours, do the Valentine's, peek around, and there were so many hands-on things for the kids to do that it was terrific. So it was a hidden gem. There you go. So when you go to these museums, I know you have a son, how do you plan? I know, does he go with you most of the time? If you're planning with him, what are your strategies for planning a visit as a family visit?
Well, my son just turned 4, and
so he's still pretty young.
Yeah, he doesn't know what's going on half the time. So we usually only take him to free museums, which are, in abundance everywhere. So that's not really usually an issue. I say that because, to your question, oftentimes we don't last too long, maybe 20 minutes for whatever reason. So I really am not in the business of paying somebody $10 to get 10% of the experience. So we usually go to free places, but he's pretty good as long as you keep them stimulated, and he's not going to sit through a long tour from a historic house, which we understand.
Right.
So we team up, my wife and I, and she'll entertain him while I pay more attention to the tour, so to speak.
You do the job part of it.
Yeah, and but it's fun. I mean, it gets us out every weekend. He gets to see a lot of different things around the state.
Right.
Every weekend we're doing something different and seeing some different stuff. And we try to work in a lot of the nature centers too that have a lot of the outdoor activities, which seems to be the most fun for younger kids. And there's, again, way more of them than I ever knew existed a couple of years ago.
Well, I think too, so my girls now are 10 and 8, and we didn't take them to many museums when they were little for that very reason, just because you don't want to pay a huge entrance fee and then have them melt down and then be mad at them because they're not having fun when you drag them to a museum they didn't want, asked to go to in the first place. But some of the things we've learned are, my husband is fantastic at making a game out of it. Even like Mystic Aquarium, he took the girls to the aquarium one time, and they each brought a pad of paper and a pencil, and he had them draw like the biggest fish, or draw, so he made like a scavenger hunt out of it. And I think some of the museums have those activities built in, knowing, kind of making the experience age appropriate. We did another outing on Martin Luther King Day to the Wadsworth Museum, and again went thinking, okay, if we go for a short period of time, kind of leave having them want more, and they had a ball. They had all sorts of activities going on. And again, I felt like, well, it's free, so we can enjoy it as long or as short as we want, and the investment isn't so painful. So we're going to roll in another clip of our trip to the Wadsworth, and you'll see some of those strategies that we talked about. so you could see in the video that there was a family day, so there were activities already planned. And, with kids of my girl's age, crafts are always a winner. You can always, and there were some young kids I think you could see doing the crafts. They liked looking at the map and trying to find their way around. And then the museum had the art pack where they create like a scavenger hunt and activities around the art. So those are some of the things that have worked well for us. We touched a little bit on the cost. So this whole experience of going so far to 150 museums, are most of them like low admission? Are they donation? What is if for families who are on a budget and looking for like a staycation kind of thing where they're saving money, what is the scoop on general cost?
Well, first and foremost, it's always going to be cheaper to stay here than to fly somewhere or go somewhere to stay in a hotel. But I knew you were going to ask this question, so I started looking at the list and just to get a general feeling of how many were free. Because I always say over half of them are free, and people sort of raise their eyebrows and think,
So I'm raising my
I
eyebrows.
think I'm crazy, but it...
Really?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, just in those West Hartford alone, all those college art galleries are free.
Yeah.
The Jewish Heritage Civilization one is free. The JCC one is free. There's actually another one over at the JCC. It's not really a museum. It's another historical Jewish exhibit. That's free. And that's half of the ones in our town. And every town is pretty much like that. Even some of the bigger ones that you wouldn't necessarily know. I mentioned the ones down at Yale. Everyone at UConn. All the university ones are usually free. But beyond that, there are ones that ask for donations, which, if you're getting an hour or 2 hours of entertainment from, what's a couple dollars? It's nothing for what you're getting from them, and they certainly deserve it. And the ones that do charge, I could count on less than two hands how many are more than $10 in the state. Maybe.
That's surprising.
Maybe
Yeah.
15, 20 tops, but I really don't think it's more than that.
Right.
And they're all the ones that anyone watching this has heard of.
Right,
Pretty
exactly.
much.
They aren't the hidden gems, they're the
Right.
known gems.
And
Yeah. The
there's
obvious
an irony
ones.
to that, So
Right.
people say, "Oh, where do you
Right.
want to go?" Well, I want to go to the place I've heard about 5,000 times.
Right.
That happens to cost
Or been
$17.
several times, or right.
Where meanwhile, on the way to get to that place that costs $20, they're passing 60 smaller, cheaper or free places that
Yeah.
aren't as big or as well known, but you can still have fun at those places.
Well, and there are also a lot, like the Wadsworth, when we went to the Wadsworth, it was a community day, and they have those periodically. The Connecticut Historical Museum, like I mentioned, does every first Saturday, morning for a few hours is open, for
Really?
families. Yeah, I mean, they're...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think some companies, like if I had a Bank of America account, and I know they did like a free museum day if you brought in showed your Bank of America card. So there are lots of opportunities.
The Smithsonian sponsors a museum day. I think it's usually in May. And it's not just Smithsonian museums, but thousands of museums around the country that are all free on that day. I looked in Connecticut, it's about 25 museums, and several of them are other ones you have heard
Right.
of that are free on that day. Connecticut has an open house day. It's always the second Saturday in June, where hundreds of museums and other similar type attractions are free or at least discounted, or they have special programs. And like you said, look into your corporate programs where you work. Where I work, it's a smaller company, but they're a member company of the Wadsworth, and I can go there for free when I want to. So.
And the libraries have.
Oh yeah,
I know the West Hartford Library has a list of
the West Hartford
museums that
Library
you can get
Museum Pass
passes.
program. It's great. They have maybe 15 museums, all the way up to a couple up in. My son loves Eric Carle books, and there's an Eric Carle museum. It's up in Amherst, I think, somewhere in Massachusetts. But West Hartford Library has free passes to that,
Right.
as long as you reserve them. And I think they're only good for one day, but it's free.
Yeah, I think you pick them up on that day and you have to return
Right.
them on that day. But it's nice to have that opportunity, and I think a lot of people are kind of looking to not travel so much these days. So
Yeah, I'm sounding like I'm the cheapest person
yeah,
in the
no,
world.
I brought up the question. Because I'm cheap, no. But I think it's important. I mean, if you're talking about staying in town and wanting to do things locally, if you have a large family, it's important to know that. Not most of the museums on your website, you have links to all of these museums if they have a website, so you can find out the information on when they're open and if they have a family day or.
I think that's an important point. I can't keep up with all of it on my site. Obviously, it would be a full-time job, and I'm not getting paid for this.
Yes.
But it's important to check the museum first before going there, because sometimes the hours are a bit
the smaller ones are
finicky.
A little bit, yeah. So your website is www.connecticutmuseumquest.com, and on there is the list of all the Connecticut museums. The ones that you visited, there's a report of kind of your experience, lots of humor, and then hours and if there's an admission, all the kind of the things that you would need to know. You also cover a few other things like hiking and other things of interest in Connecticut. So, and then you also were featured in the February Connecticut magazine. So that's a good article to check out too. They followed you around for a day and what it was like. So, yeah.
It was,
you don't want to talk about that?
No, it was great. The guy who wrote it was great. He had just graduated Yale, and he's doing very well for himself now down in D.C., but he called me up, and we spent a full day together, a good 8 hours, and prying into every corner of my life, which was a new experience, as is this. But it was fun, and I think the article's great, and go to your library and check it out.
Check it out, absolutely. We're out of time. It always goes so fast. But if you are in the situation where your kids are saying, I'm bored and there's nothing to do, you now know it's not true, and you can go to ConnecticutMuseumQuest.com and find a large list of places in your own backyard that you can go on the weekend, over spring break, and during the summer, whenever you find a free minute. I'm Sarah Connor. You've been watching Life and Style with Sarah, and don't forget to tune in next month to a brand new episode. Thanks for watching, and good night.